Good evening, good morning. Welcome to week 7 of PSSL 6240, Political Violence and Terrorism, here at George Washington University. Almost done with the class. Again, I think we had a very good discussion for week 6, and I look forward to wrapping this up. So just announcements. Adobe Connect session is this Thursday. 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll do two things. Boston Marathon intelligence failures. That will be, again, that's a continuation of week 6, and that will be for group 3. We'll go, and that'll be about a 20 to 25 minute presentation. And then I want to spend the remainder of the time doing a job talk. I've already gotten some questions, so if there's more, please let me know. So Adobe Connect session this Thursday. And as I mentioned earlier, job talk, that should, again, cover careers in the federal government, as well as any questions you might have. I'll also add that if you guys have insights, please feel free to share. I'm just a one-person shop, and I just have my observations, but I think it would be great if we can get observations from everyone in the course. And then final prep. I will send out a video this week that talks about the topics that will be on the final and what you should study for. As I said in the first class, the final isn't hard. It's not going to be left or out of left field questions, but you still have to study, you still have to review your notes, still have to review the lectures, and know the material. So, and I give you week 8 to do that. So paper 2, everyone's gotten their paper back. Better, much better. I think maybe, having to write the second time, plus getting lessons learned from the first paper, plus this paper being a little bit less esoteric than the first one, I think helped out. So again, overall, the paper was better. For the people, again, the drawbacks, still a little bit too broad. As I said earlier, the more focus you have on these papers, the better your analysis will be, the better your argument will be. If you're doing a generic one over the world, the threat of WMD from Al-Qaeda, then that's kind of a very broad subject. But if you're talking about the ISIS and its ability to employ plague, then you can talk about things that are very specific, that are relevant. You can talk about shelf life of plague, person-to-person contact, the actual impacts of BW, of biological weapons, how many people get infections, the epidemiology rates. Some people did go into that level of detail, and that's kind of good. That's what I was looking for. If you're doing sarin, well, this kind of brings me up to the second question. You must discuss the science and show how the science proves your point. If you're doing sarin, you have to talk about the shelf life of sarin. It's only good for so long. You have to talk about binary versus unitary sarin, and the effects or the ability to move binary sarin, and does that make it more of a threat? You have to talk about shelf life, binary, unitary, dissemination. All those things, the science of moving that is critical to prove your point one way or another. And then just as a kind of an information note, another art imitates course. I don't know if anyone watches the course Homeland or the TV show Homeland, but this exact scenario was brought up. Sarin attack, this time in Germany. And I'm not going to say that Homeland is a realistic movie. It's not. But you'd be surprised how many times a policymaker will watch a television show or read a book and think, is that scenario likely? So again, art imitates course here, and a sarin attack against a major Western city, at least in Hollywood, is being contemplated. So food for thought. And then finally, relevant policy recommendations. And this, again, goes back. If you're focusing your paper on a particular subject, then the policy recommendations should flow from that. Again, the big policy recommendations like we need to do more about ISIS or we need to do more about Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. That's not what I was looking for. I was doing for specific things that a policymaker can do to stop whatever threat stream you had identified. So again, we're talking things like border control, export control, better information to the general public dealing with a specific threat. Again, a lot of people, most of you did mention that ricin was more of a weapon of mass disruption. And then the public information campaign would be, okay, let's make sure if there's ricin attack that it doesn't cause the second, third order levels of panic. And a lot of you recommended correctly that a governor or state official or federal official should have a better information campaign. Those are the types of recommendations I was looking for. Not, we need to do more against ISIS. We need to do more against Al Qaeda. We need to, those are far too broad. So that's kind of an overview of my thoughts on paper 2. If you have questions with the grade or just questions in general, I'll stay late on the Adobe Connect session and we can talk in general. A review of week 6. Before I go into week 6, I saw Peter Bergen's homegrown terror, homegrown extremism documentary last Monday on HBO. If you do have HBO, I would recommend it. Another incident where art imitates class. They go into detail on the Nidal Hassan case, and they talk about the things we talked about. Could you have stopped it? Could he have been radicalized? How was communications with a known Al-Qaeda sympathizer? How were these communications not disseminated to his chain of command? It is a little bit, I hadn't seen these videos, but some of the things that were talked about in the paper that you guys read on Nidal Hassan, his briefing of Islamic extremism and his briefings that he made, they show videos of that. I didn't know those videos were out there, but they show videos of that. And actually they look quite innocuous when you see the videos. So I would highly recommend watching that TV show if you do have HBO, and if it comes out on Amazon or another non-subscription based format, I would try and watch it there too. And I'll see if I can find it anywhere on those videos. But review of week 6. The one question I'm going to ask, and this is again because we have people in the field, and this issue keeps popping up. Does intelligence collected at the federal level get disseminated down? And this is a issue that keeps coming up. And for those of you who are in Iraq and Afghanistan, you might have heard the statement, every shooter is a sensor, which means that every soldier on the ground is collecting information and every soldier on the ground is informed so he knows his or her threat environment. And it brings me to this question. Does intelligence at the federal level get disseminated down? In the Nova documentary, this is probably the most egregious incident of this, in the Nova documentary, the NSA had collected intelligence on communications between San Diego and Yemeni safe house. This information was not disseminated down to the San Diego FBI field office, the San Diego Police Department, those types of issues. That, I think, is an egregious failure. Part of the DHS fusion centers and everything was designed to correct this failure, but I don't know in practice if that's actually happening. And again, in Boston, we'll talk about this on Thursday, the federal government was aware of Tsarnaev's, the older Boston brother, his ties to extremism and his flag on his visa and all types of things. And that information was not disseminated down to the Boston police. So it does beg the question, does intelligence collected at the federal level get down the level? The federal government knows about things like terrorist travel patterns and people who are flagged because of their customs. Does this information get translated down to the police station at the lowest level? Food for thought. Another point, is law enforcement approachable? I always ask this question, and this bleeds into week 7. Let me bring up a scenario. If a mom feels that her son is being involved in jihadist activity, either through the internet or through his friends, would that mom go to the police, feel comfortable going to the police and saying, something's wrong with my son. Is law enforcement approachable at that level? Again, we have people from different law enforcement jurisdictions throughout in this course, and I've always, I wonder that. Would a mom come to you and say, or a mom or a dad or a relative, and say, this is how my son is involved with this activity, can you help me? A lot of this with the gang task forces kind of use this level of detail where it was, hey, a mom or a relative could go up to the police and say, my son is involved in gang activity, can you interdict him to make sure he doesn't go along that path? And he was almost given carte blanche, like whatever crimes he committed in the past were kind of forgiven, drug charges were kind of forgiven so that the police can interdict. And I always wondered, could you do something like that on the Islamic extremism side? Just going on some other thoughts. Again, I think we had a very robust discussion on 9/11 as an intel failure. I think 3/4 of people were upset about the lack of intelligence coordination related to 9/11. About 1/4 thought it was a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking, and that you couldn't have known at the end what was going on. I would, before I saw the Nova documentary, I would have said that 9/11 was not an intel failure. That the bunch of shadowy people coming into our country and conducting an attack. Not to say that something like that's bound to happen, but it's very difficult to stop. However, after watching the Nova NSA documentary, knowing that we were monitoring a Yemeni safe house that was Al-Qaeda affiliate, knowing that there was communications between that Yemeni safe house and a U.S. address in San Diego, knowing that there was 2 people on a watch list that were known Al-Qaeda sympathizers that were part of the 9/11 plot, knowing that, I think is an intel failure. I think that crosses the threshold, even in our pre-9/11 world, that is unacceptable. Unacceptable intel failure, unacceptable bureaucratic failure, whatever you want to call it. That information being out there and not disseminated. So yes, I would say 9/11 is an intel failure based on that fact. I will let you guys decide if that's true or not, or to what extent, but that is kind of where I'm focusing on. And then the last point I want to just bring up, and this goes with the Fort Hood shooting, it goes with the Boston Marathon attacks, is at what point do we scrutinize further? Nadal Hassan, he had made these statements that were jihadist in nature. So does he serve further scrutiny? Probably. Does Nadal Hassan, based on his communications with Anwar al-Awlaki and his jihadist statements, does he deserve to be watch-listed? Probably. At the very least, maybe discharged from the military? Probably. But then that brings me up to my last point, and this is probably the most difficult thing to bring up. At what point can you arrest him? And that's the only way you can stop something at Fort Hood. And as I concluded with that point is, Nadal Hassan didn't commit a crime till he fired his first shot at that soldier processing center. The younger Tsarnaev brother, again, he didn't commit terrorism until he placed that bomb in that, or the Tsarnaev brothers didn't commit terrorism until they placed that bomb in that garbage at the Boston Marathon. Even if they're watch listed, can you really stop a Fort Hood or a Boston Marathon attack without arresting people? Probably not. Nadal Hassan, even if you discharged him, he could still buy a gun, and he could still go to any place outside of Fort Hood filled with soldiers and do what he wants. The San Bernardino case. We're not getting a lot of accurate information. We'll have to wait a little bit, get a lot of speculation. I've heard that, they were building bombs in that apartment and no one mentioned anything. Again, we'll wait till the full story comes out on that. But again, San Bernardino might be another case where they didn't commit a crime based on initial reports until they started to open fire. At least, the husband in that case. So again, what can you do to stop these? Or are these things inevitable in a free society? Just kind of food for thought for week 6 as we try and use intelligence to stop terrorism. So week 7, two topics: leadership targeting and the domestic jihadist threat. The readings, the Cronin Byman, you should be able to access them for free on Foreign Affairs through the link if they haven't gotten into your course pack. If you're having trouble getting those articles, please let me know. But they're excellent articles on leadership targeting, on the success and failure of leadership targeting, when it works, why it works, is it worth the trade-off. I'm going to send a John Oliver skit I just saw it this past week on drones that I think is funny and educational at the same time, and I'll send that out with this email. And then the question to ask again: when does leadership targeting work? Under what conditions? When does it not work? And that's something that to consider for this course or this section. And then the domestic jihadist threat. The CRS paper is like 200 pages long. The first 58 pages are only what you should focus on. The rest are just, you might want to peruse the rest, but the first 58 pages are the more important stuff. And it's 58 pages, but it's not really 58 pages. It's a lot of graphics and illustrations and footnotes, so it's not a very long piece. I'm also going to assign ISIS in America, put together by George Washington University. Excellent paper. It shouldn't take you that long to get through. And I think it's definitely very educational, and it just came out a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just going to add it to the syllabus now. Pardon me. And then finally, again, when you're going through the readings and lectures, what are the causes of domestic jihadist threat? That's just something to consider. So again, that wraps up week 6, previews week 7. And if there's questions or issues, please let me know.